The evening after the police incident, Sarah sat on their back porch, a glass of wine untouched beside her, as she stared vacantly at the fence separating their property from Constance's. The children were finally asleep after an emotional day. Michael found her there, moonlight casting shadows across her troubled face. "We can't go on like this," she said softly as he took the seat beside her. "The kids are afraid in their own home." "I know," Michael replied, running a hand through his hair. "I've documented everything. Maybe it's time to consider legal options." Sarah nodded, then remembered her scheduled video call with Jennifer, her college roommate and still close friend. They'd maintained their friendship through moves, marriages, and career changes, making time for monthly catch-ups regardless of their busy lives. The next evening, Sarah settled at her desk for their call, forcing a smile when Jennifer's face appeared on screen. "Okay, what's wrong?" Jennifer asked immediately, her attorney's perceptiveness cutting through Sarah's facade. "And don't say nothing, because I've known you for 15 years. The composure Sarah had maintained for her family's sake crumbled. She recounted the months of harassment, her voice breaking when describing how Emma had asked if they could move away from the mean lady. "This is serious harassment," Jennifer said, her professional demeanor emerging. "And targeting children crosses so many lines." "We're documenting everything," Sarah explained, "but I don't know what good it will do. The HOA board seems intimidated by her." Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "You know I work for Senator Harrison now, right? This is actually directly related to legislation he's working on. Housing issues. I thought he focused on veterans affairs," Sarah said, confusion momentarily replacing her distress. "Both, actually. But this HOA overreach issue has become personal for him." Jennifer explained that Senator Harrison's 12-year-old son, Jacob, had autism. When they'd moved to a new neighborhood 3 years earlier, neighbors had complained about Jacob's occasional sensory meltdowns, attempting to use HOA rules to essentially force the family out. The senator realized this was happening all across the country, HOAs being weaponized against families with children, veterans with PTSD, people with disabilities. He's been quietly building bipartisan support for federal protections against this kind of discrimination. Sarah sat straighter. "So other families are experiencing this too?" "Absolutely. The senator is gathering case studies for congressional testimony. Would you be willing to share your story? He's making a district visit next week." Sarah hesitated. "I don't know, Jen. We're not looking to become some political talking point." "It's not political for him, Sarah. It's about protecting families. His son still has nightmares about their former neighbor. He wants real change." Jennifer paused. "Just meet with him. If nothing else, he might have practical advice." After discussing it with Michael that night, they agreed to meet the senator at his local office the following Tuesday. Michael took the day off work, bringing a meticulously organized folder containing every documented incident. Dated journal entries, copies of HOA violation notices, screenshots of texts from neighbors describing similar experiences, and most compelling, security footage from their doorbell camera showing Constance's confrontational behavior and her photographing their children. "I feel like we're overreacting," Sarah whispered as they sat in the waiting area of the senator's office. Michael squeezed her hand. "We're protecting our family." The office door opened, and Senator James Harrison walked out himself rather than sending an aide. In his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and the casual confidence of someone accustomed to both power and service, he extended his hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, I'm Jen Harrison. Thank you for coming in. Jennifer has told me a bit about your situation, and I'd like to hear more directly from you." Michael and Sarah Morgan had finally saved enough for their dream home in Oakwood Estates, a quiet suburban neighborhood with manicured lawns and a well-established homeowners association. Their children, 10-year-old Emma and 8-year-old Ethan, were thrilled about the backyard swing set and community pool. As a military veteran who'd served 2 tours overseas, Michael valued the peaceful community for his family, while Sarah, an elementary school teacher, appreciated the excellent school district. The moving truck pulled away on a crisp Saturday morning in April, leaving the Morgans surrounded by cardboard boxes and the hopeful chaos of new beginnings. Emma immediately claimed the bedroom with the bay window overlooking the backyard maple tree, while Ethan raced through empty rooms, his footsteps echoing through their new home. "Can we set up the basketball hoop today, Dad?" Ethan asked, bouncing with excitement. Michael ruffled his son's hair. "Let's get the essentials unpacked first, buddy. But I promise we'll have it up by this afternoon." True to his word, by 3 p.m., Michael had assembled the portable basketball hoop at the edge of their driveway. Emma and Ethan took turns shooting baskets, their laughter floating through the spring air as Sarah unpacked kitchenware inside. "Emma, over here," Ethan called, his small hands reaching up as his sister passed him the ball. The rhythmic bounce of the basketball on concrete was punctuated by occasional cheers when one of them made a basket. That was when they first encountered Constance Wilkins. The clipped sound of dress shoes on pavement announced her arrival before the children noticed her. A trim woman in her late 50s with meticulously highlighted hair and pearl earrings stood at the edge of their driveway, her arms folded across her chest. The slight downward curve of her mouth seemed practiced, as if displeasure were her default expression. "You must be the new residents," she said, her voice as crisp as her ironed blouse. "I'm Constance Wilkins, HOA board vice president and your next-door neighbor." Before either child could respond, she produced a thick binder seemingly from nowhere. "I thought it prudent to welcome you properly and ensure you understand our community standards." Michael stepped outside, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Hello there, I'm Michael Morgan. Nice to meet you." Constance barely acknowledged his extended hand with a brief, limp handshake. "Mr. Morgan, I'm afraid I must point out that Section 7, Paragraph 3 of our HOA bylaws clearly states that excessive noise is prohibited between the hours of 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. on weekends, as many residents work from home or enjoy afternoon rest." Michael's brow furrowed. "The children are just playing basketball. It's only 4 p.m. Nevertheless," Constance continued, tapping a manicured fingernail against the binder, "the constant bouncing constitutes repetitive noise that carries through the neighborhood. I work from my home office on weekends, and sound travels quite effectively between our properties." Sarah appeared in the doorway, sensing tension. "Is everything all right?" "Mrs. Morgan, I presume." Constance nodded curtly. "I was just explaining our noise restrictions to your husband. Additionally, recreational equipment must be properly stored out of street view when not in use." She gestured toward the basketball hoop. Michael nodded politely, though Sarah noticed the muscle tightening in his jaw, a telltale sign of his carefully controlled frustration. "We received the HOA handbook during closing and have reviewed it. I don't recall those specific restrictions, but we'll certainly take another look." "See that you do," Constance replied, handing over the binder. "Welcome to Oakwood Estates. We pride ourselves on maintaining certain standards here." As she walked away with rigid posture, Ethan whispered loudly, "Dad, why is that lady so angry?" "She's not angry, son," Michael replied, though his eyes followed Constance's retreating figure. "Just particular." Sarah met Michael's gaze over the children's heads. They'd followed all the rules they were aware of. The basketball hoop was the same model they'd seen in at least 3 other driveways during their home tours. "Maybe we should take a break and unpack some more," Sarah suggested gently, ushering the suddenly subdued children inside. Little did they know this was just the beginning. New Community Welcome Committee, to help new families transition into the neighborhood. 2 weeks later, a for sale sign appeared in Constance's yard. 3 days after that, the Morgans found an envelope in their mailbox containing a brief handwritten note. "I still believe in standards, but perhaps I was overzealous in my methods. See you." By summer's end, Michael had joined the HOA board, bringing his military experience in leadership and conflict resolution to the role. The revised HOA guidelines became a model circulated among similar communities nationwide. Senator Harrison's legislation establishing federal guidelines for reasonable HOA governance passed with bipartisan support that fall. During the Senate hearing, he cited the Oakwood Estates case as an example of how communities could self-correct when confronted with evidence of discriminatory practices. On the 1-year anniversary of their move-in date, the Morgans hosted a block party spanning several driveways. Children played basketball and created elaborate chalk drawings on sidewalks without fear. Emma and Ethan proudly showed off their new treehouse, approved by the reformed HOA board after thoughtful consideration of safety and aesthetic guidelines. Senator Harrison made a surprise appearance, spending time talking with residents about housing rights while enjoying Sarah's homemade lemonade. As twilight fell, neighbors brought out lawn chairs to watch the children catch fireflies. "You know," Sarah said to Michael as they watched Emma teaching the senator's son Jacob how to make a proper s'more at the community fire pit. "Sometimes it takes standing up to a bully to build a true community." Michael nodded, surveying the gathering of neighbors who had become friends. And sometimes the most unlikely catalyst, even a neighborhood Karen, can lead to meaningful change. In Washington, D.C., a framed photograph of the Oakwood Estates block party sat on Senator Harrison's desk, a reminder that governance at its best wasn't about power, but about protecting the simple joy of children playing freely in their own neighborhoods. By mid-May, the Morgans had settled into a routine. The house felt like home, with family photos on the walls and the lingering scent of Sarah's weekend baking. But their comfort was constantly undermined by Constance's growing fixation on their family. It began with a formal letter in their mailbox, official HOA stationery, citing Emma's sidewalk chalk art as defacement of community property. The colorful butterfly and rainbow designs that had delighted passing neighbors were photographed and attached as evidence. "But Mom, I only drew on our driveway," Emma protested, her lower lip trembling, as Sarah explained they needed to wash away her artwork. "I know, sweetheart. Sometimes people have different ideas about rules," Sarah replied, struggling to explain unreasonableness to a child who still believed in fundamental fairness. 2 weeks later, Ethan's 8th birthday party became Constance's next target. Despite ending by 7 p.m. on a Friday, well within noise ordinance hours, with just 5 friends in their fenced backyard, Constance appeared at their door the following morning with a noise meter. "I recorded 62 decibels from my garden," she announced, holding out a device with digital readings. The HOA guidelines clearly state ambient noise should not exceed 55 decibels. Michael, still in his bathrobe and holding coffee, stared incredulously. "You stood in your yard measuring the sound of children singing happy birthday." "Rules are rules, Mr. Morgan," she replied. "Consider this a verbal warning." By June, the situation had deteriorated further. Constance began photographing the Morgan children whenever they played outside, her phone camera visibly pointed at them from behind her living room curtains or over the fence. "Daddy, the mean lady is taking pictures again," Ethan whispered one Saturday, abandoning his soccer ball and retreating to the porch. Michael felt a surge of protective anger. "Stay here," he instructed, marching toward Constance's yard. "Mrs. Wilkins, I need to speak with you about photographing my children. It's making them uncomfortable and frankly, it's inappropriate." Constance lowered her phone, unfazed. "I'm merely documenting violations for the HOA board. Your children damaged my hydrangeas with that soccer ball last week. They haven't been near your garden. If you have concerns, speak to us directly instead of surveilling our family." Military families, she sighed with exaggerated patience, are often transient and don't understand the importance of neighborhood standards. "You'll be relocated soon enough, while we permanent residents maintain our community values." Michael's expression hardened at the thinly veiled prejudice. "My service has nothing to do with this, Mrs. Wilkins. And we bought this home. We're not going anywhere." As summer progressed, Constance escalated to calling the neighborhood security patrol whenever the children ventured outside. The Morgans received warning letters about unsightly recreational equipment, despite having the same basketball hoop as 3 other families on their street. Threats of fines followed for excessive water usage when the children briefly used a sprinkler during a heatwave. Emma and Ethan grew reluctant to play outdoors, asking to stay inside instead. "Why does she hate us?" Emma asked one evening, watching Constance through the window as she photographed their mailbox, claiming its color was off-shade from approved HOA specifications. Sarah had attempted organizing a neighborhood mediation, but Constance refused to attend, sending a curt email that she didn't negotiate compliance with clear regulations. The breaking point came on a warm July afternoon. Sarah supervised the children in their backyard while grading papers under the patio umbrella. Police sirens suddenly pierced the quiet, and an officer appeared at their gate. "We received a report of unsupervised minors causing a neighborhood disturbance," he explained, clearly uncomfortable as he observed the peaceful scene. "As you can see, I'm right here with my children," Sarah replied, stunned. The officer nodded apologetically. "Yes, ma'am. Sorry to bother you. We're required to investigate all calls, but there's clearly no issue here." From over the fence, Constance watched with narrowed eyes, phone still in hand. Senator Harrison's office was modestly furnished with local artwork and photos of constituents rather than the self-aggrandizing displays common to many politicians. He gestured for the Morgans to sit at a small conference table rather than across a desk, immediately reducing the formality of the meeting. "Jennifer's briefed me on the basics," he began, "but I'd like to hear directly from you." Michael and Sarah took turns recounting their experiences, Michael's military precision providing dates and specific rule citations, while Sarah's emotional intelligence captured the psychological impact on their children. As they spoke, Senator Harrison's expression darkened. When Michael played the video clips showing Constance photographing their children, the senator's jaw visibly tightened. "This isn't just harassment," he said after they finished. "This borders on stalking, and it's a textbook case of using HOA regulations as a weapon." He leaned forward. "My son Jacob was 10 when our neighbor began complaining about his destructive behaviors. What she meant was his occasional sensory overloads, something he couldn't control." The senator pulled out a photograph of a smiling boy with his father's eyes. "Our HOA threatened fines, then liens. We could fight it. I had resources many families don't. But Jacob still asks me why Mrs. Keller hated him." Sarah nodded in recognition of that particular parental heartbreak. "This has become a nationwide problem," the senator continued. "HOAs serve legitimate purposes in maintaining community standards, but they're increasingly being misused to enforce personal prejudices against families with children, veterans with PTSD, people with disabilities, and minorities." He picked up the folder of evidence the Morgans had brought. "With your permission, I'd like my office to take action on multiple fronts." By the time they left the office an hour later, a comprehensive plan was in place. The senator's chief counsel would draft a formal letter to the Oakwood Estates HOA board, citing federal fair housing laws that protect families with children from disparate treatment. The letter would specifically note that the office was gathering evidence for potential legislative hearings on HOA overreach. Additionally, the senator connected them with Patricia Alvarez, a housing rights attorney who specialized in Fair Housing Act cases. She agreed to take their case pro bono, filing a housing discrimination complaint with HUD the same day. Targeting children's normal play activities constitutes familial status discrimination, Patricia explained during their initial consultation. The Fair Housing Act is quite clear on this. But Senator Harrison's most effective action came through community channels. His field director, a masterful community organizer, quietly contacted other Oakwood Estates residents, asking if they had experienced similar issues. The response was overwhelming. "We've been afraid to use our pool because Ms. Wilkins times our swims," admitted the Rodriguez family from 3 doors down. "She reported our son's service dog as an unauthorized pet," shared the Andersons, an elderly couple whose adult son had PTSD. "She measured the height of our grass with a ruler," confessed the Patels, showing a photograph of Constance kneeling on their lawn with a measuring tape. The HOA president, Gerald Foster, was mortified when the senator's office requested all documentation related to complaints against the Morgan family and 5 other families that fit protected class categories. Even more concerning to the board was the mention that similar cases across the state might feature in upcoming congressional hearings on HOA reform legislation. This was never supposed to be adversarial, Foster stammered during an emergency phone call with the senator's office. "We value all our residents. Then demonstrate that value through action," the senator's chief counsel replied. "We're calling an emergency community meeting. I suggest your board come prepared with solutions, not excuses. Constance, stunned by the sudden scrutiny, attempted to rally support from other neighbors, but found doors suddenly closed. The tide had turned, and her power was evaporating in the face of potential legal consequences and the harsh light of public examination. The Oakwood Estates Community Center had never been so crowded. Residents filled every chair, lined the walls, and spilled out into the hallway for the emergency HOA meeting. Senator Harrison's office had requested the largest possible venue, ensuring maximum community participation. At the front table sat the HOA board members, looking considerably less authoritative than usual. Beside them sat a representative from the senator's office and Patricia Alvarez, the housing rights attorney. Constance had positioned herself in the front row, a binder of HOA regulations clutched to her chest like armor. Gerald Foster, the HOA president, called the meeting to order with visible discomfort. We've called this emergency session to address concerns about the consistent application of our community guidelines and to review our complaint resolution process. What followed was unlike any HOA meeting in Oakwood Estates history. One by one, residents approached the microphone to share their experiences. The Morgans spoke first, Michael's steady voice detailing the months of harassment while Sarah explained the emotional impact on their children. Emma asked me last week if we could move, Sarah concluded, her voice breaking slightly. No child should feel unwelcome in their own home. Then came others. The elderly couple whose grandson couldn't visit because his wheelchair ramp was deemed an unauthorized modification. The single mother who received violation notices whenever her teenage son shot basketball hoops after school. The Pakistani family, who was cited for cooking odors when making traditional meals. Patricia Alvarez addressed the room next, outlining how many of these actions potentially violated federal fair housing laws. HOAs serve legitimate purposes, she acknowledged, but they cannot be used as vehicles for harassment or to enforce preferences that have discriminatory effects on protected classes. The senator's representative explained that similar patterns were emerging nationwide. Senator Harrison's office has documented hundreds of cases where HOA regulations are being weaponized against families with children, veterans, people with disabilities, and minorities. This isn't about politics. It's about ensuring fair housing for all Americans. Constance finally stood, her voice tight with indignation. These rules exist for a reason. Property values depend on consistent standards. If people don't like the rules, they shouldn't move into covenant-controlled communities. A murmur of disagreement rippled through the room. Gerald Foster cleared his throat. The board has prepared a response to these concerns. The proposed changes were substantial. A new complaint resolution process requiring documentation and mediation before punitive measures. A review committee with diverse resident representation to evaluate rule enforcement. Clear guidelines prohibiting surveillance of neighbors. And an appeal process for violations. Additionally, Foster added, avoiding Constance's glare, the board has voted to rescind all outstanding violations against the Morgan family and others pending review under our new procedures. When the meeting concluded 3 hours later, something fundamental had shifted in Oakwood Estates. Neighbors who had never spoken before exchanged phone numbers. Plans were made for a community picnic. Several residents volunteered to form a